Hello, everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. I'm Kenneth Amaduri, and I'm joined today with an audio interview with Bob Moriarty of 321gold.com, a great personality and investor and person who does a tremendous amount of research in the economy and in the resource sector specifically on what is going on and how to profit from it. And obviously, looking at an almost $2,000 gold price, we got a lot to catch up on. Our last interview was in September of 2019 when gold was right around $1,500. People were scratching their head, wondering if gold had peaked. And here we are today. So, Bob, thanks so much for coming on Crush the Street with me today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Bob, the title of our last interview was Unpredictable Gold and Silver Price Bubble. No one will be able to call the top of this. And again, that was back at a $1,500 gold price in September of last year. And that was after, mind you, a strong move we saw during the summer of 2019. And we were doing this in September. And then from then we had the illness, we had the riots, we've had, the election coming up here. It's been a really wild ride in 2020. So I'd like to get your reflections on where we are right now in 2020.
We are in the scariest period in my entire life. We have so many black swans circling that it's pretty bizarre. We're going to see things in the next 2 months that I don't think people are expecting.
Bob, when it comes to the move we've seen in gold, does it surprise you? Are you underwhelmed with its move? I mean, again, our last interview was in September of 2019, and we're almost at $2,000, which is pretty exciting. But considering what we've seen this year, are you surprised it's not even higher?
Not really. Let's go back. I can't remember the specifics of the conversation, but all during 2019, I was calling for a market crash in October. And then the Fed came out September and started pouring money onto a bonfire. So I'm going to absolutely concede I was wrong about a crash in October. But in fact, what happened was the Fed postponed it and moved it into 2020. Now, what's happened in 2020, no one, you couldn't be sober or straight and predict what has happened. And here's what's interesting. You're talking about the price of gold, and everybody's talking about the price of gold and the price of silver, and they're missing the point. When you talk about the price of gold, you're talking about two commodities, correct?
Two commodities?
Yeah.
What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, what are you pricing gold in?
Sure. So gold and the dollar, is that what you're referring to?
Absolutely. I mean, if I ask you to quote gold in terms of the Zimbabwe dollar, could you?
No, not at all.
No, of course not. And the crazy thing is we're focused on gold and we should be focused on the dollar. Now, I in a million years, I would have not predicted, and I don't know anybody else who would have predicted, the Federal Reserve is literally hurling money at the problem. But it's a $250 trillion debt that the world cannot afford. Every municipality in the United States is functionally bankrupt. The US government is functionally bankrupt. Most countries are functionally bankrupt. And what they're doing is saying, screw it, We know we're going bankrupt. Let's pretend that the dollar has value, or the euro, or the yen, or the British pound, and until people wake up, we can have a hell of a party. Who would have guessed in a million years people would be paid $600 a month or $600 a week in addition to the normal unemployment insurance to not work?
Yeah, I want to say in the Bush era, when the financial crisis started in 08, people were getting $25 a week or $50 a week extra. I mean, here we're seeing $600, which is insane to when you think about it. How much is getting thrown at the system, which is no wonder why we've seen the stock market recover in record fashion. I think the bear market, the crash turned around in 33 days when normally it takes a whole year to do that. So any thoughts on that?
Well, exactly right. The shares have no particular value. It's the dollar that is being destroyed. So people in the general stock market who own Tesla or Apple think, isn't this wonderful? My shares are going up. But the same thing happened in Zimbabwe. Now, I personally believe there's an extreme high probability of there literally being hyperinflation. You cannot predict a price for gold. You cannot predict a price for silver because the dollar is being destroyed. The United States government knows they're bankrupt. This is the last run at the Treasury. They're stealing everything they can steal. The 1% is making out like bandits, which they are. But there's a downside to that. Okay, do you understand what the functional downside is to making the 1% even richer?
Well, we're going into extreme socialism. The poor and middle class are getting crushed. So many things.
Thank you.
I mean, we are living in a world where our children are going to live a lower standard of living than previous generations.
Thank you. You are exactly correct. There is a great video. Everybody should go to YouTube and they should put in monkeys and envy. And there's a video of a scientific experiment of what happens when you have two monkeys and you feed one monkey pieces of cucumber and the other monkey pieces of grape. And when the monkey that's being fed the cucumber sees the other guy gets the grape, he goes off. He goes absolutely nuts. He's throwing pieces of cucumber at the guy doing the test. And the same thing is true in real life. All this stupidity going on in Seattle and going on in Vancouver is because people are angry because they realize a very small segment is being made richer and richer and richer, and they're being made more poor. And that, unfortunately, is going to continue, and it's going to get worse. Now, if you're looking for leadership to pull the United States out of this, who do you look at? Biden? The guy's 77 years old. He's a dirty old man, and he's senile. And Donald Trump is a blithering idiot, okay? He's done a few things right, but the mainstream media and the deep state hate him. The last election, the DOJ and the FBI and the CIA tried to pick the president of the United States. Now, does anybody believe this election is going to be any better? The Democrats are already setting up for a major confrontation. Now, I personally don't think there'll be an election. I think we could very easily be in a civil war in the next 2 months. One of the things that very few people think about, and virtually nobody talks about except me, there's 330 million Americans and there's 395 million guns. And when those 330 million Americans get angry, they're going to reach for their guns. 53 million Americans have gone on the unemployment rolls in the last 6 months. We've got a bonfire being set up that is exceptionally dangerous. Let's go back to gold. Gold and silver and platinum and palladium and rhodium and commodities are an insurance policy against a building that's burning down. So there used to be risk in buying gold and silver. There used to be risk in buying shares of resource stocks. And when the federal government says we're going to destroy the dollar, they've taken all the risk out of investing.
I would, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, philosophically, Bob. But one of the things that I want to throw at you, and just to kind of get your thoughts on this, is, the possibility for the government to continue to string things along with things that, again, push the envelope of traditional confinements, traditional constraints that, the Federal Reserve might have, the government might have. We're talking about unemployment, $600 checks. I mean, the next thing might be universal basic income, where they're just, direct depositing into every American's accounts. And maybe that causes the stock market to go to new highs. And then, people are put at ease, and then gold gets slammed because all of a sudden everything looks strong, and Apple and Tesla are doing good. And then, who knows what else to do? Negative interest rates and, buying US equities and junk bonds, and they just ramp it up. I mean, is it possible they do this for another couple decades? I know that seems extreme, but, I just have seen them continue to inch things along time and time again. So how do you reflect on this?
The rate of change, it's curvilinear. It's literally going straight up. Now, I had predicted a crash in October last year based on a rational world. But I knew the United States was bankrupt. I knew that $250 trillion was going to get paid. And in a rational world, we would eventually go bankrupt. But what's happened is the government has used COVID as an excuse for yanking the rug right out from underneath the economy. Now, I don't know what kind of a blithering idiot came to the conclusion that the very best thing that you could do to solve a virus that is a tiny problem at best, it's not much worse than a bad flu season, is to destroy the lives of 53 million Americans. But nobody has come to grips yet with the fact that, wait a minute, sooner or later, the government has to run out of money. The analogy that I use is a balloon. If you can imagine, you got a balloon, and for all I care, you can have the world's biggest balloon. If you blow into it, what's going to happen?
It's going to blow.
It's going to blow. Now, I can't tell you when it's going to blow. You can't tell me when it's going to blow. Nobody knows when it's going to blow. However, what they've done since March is so simply insane, and I mean that, utterly insane, and it's criminal. Let me give you a statistic. I read the statistic and just went, holy shit, how can that be true? Uganda in Central Africa has a serious problem with malaria. So people there take HCQ on a regular basis, like once a week, they take the pills. Okay. Now, when people talk about HCQ, that sounds like a very complicated drug. No, it's not. It's synthetic quinine. That's all HCQ is, quinine. How many cases of COVID do you think there have been in all of Uganda?
Don't know the stats.
6. 6 cases. Okay. Now, doctors in the United States are forbidden from prescribing quinine to their patients under the theory that just because we've used the drug for 200 years, we don't know what the side effects are. And I'm just sitting here saying, are people really that stupid? And of course, the answer is yes. There is some kind of a move, Fauci and Gates and CDC and the NIH, they want to inoculate people with a vaccine. And they're really serious about it, okay? Literally to the point of mandatory vaccination. Now, I'm going to ask you kind of a trick question that I don't expect you to have the answer to. You have any idea of how many successful vaccines there have been against COVID viruses in history? And the common cold is a COVID virus. How many successful vaccines have there been?
You know, I don't know the nuance to that question, but I do know they've been working on stuff for years. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure where you're going with it.
0. They have never had a successful COVID vaccine, period. You don't talk about a vaccine against the cold because everybody accepts the fact that no matter how much money you throw at it, you can't do it because the cold is constantly changing. Same thing is true with the flu. We have drugs that are proven that do work, and we're not allowed to use them. And the government and the CDC and the NIH are talking about forcing people into a vaccine when we have no idea whatsoever of what the long-term consequences are. Now, I'm sorry, but that is utterly insane.
Yeah, it's interesting how Americans can ignore the facts and make very, very serious decisions on how to proceed forward based on, you know, a lot of circumstantial facts and the things that you're saying, and can't make, you know, a cautious decision to question these vaccines. You know, it's as if they would be very bad poker players. But that's the thing, you know, people aren't betting anything. You know, it's just having an opinion on something and in controlling the masses. That's what the media does. That's what the government does. And there's no way to have some, you know, real personal accountability on an individual level around the world. And I think that's a real problem with society nowadays. So yeah, I appreciate going down this little rabbit hole here because it really exposes where we are as a society. But let's circle back to gold here. It was back in 2010, central banks around the world turned from being net sellers of gold to net buyers of gold. And considering what we've seen over the last year, I mean, do you suspect central banks were preparing for this and expected some sort of unsustainable situation, and that's why they became net buyers of gold?
Yeah, of course. I mean, those guys have access to their own books, and anybody with any sense who passed Economics 101 knew 10 years ago that the banks were functionally bankrupt. We had a great opportunity in 2008 to reset the system, and we should have let the big funds crash. We should have let the banks crash, and the government didn't do that. So the banks looked around and said, "Hey, we need to protect ourselves. What can we do?" Now, a more immediate interest was Warren Buffett, who has hated gold for 40 or 50 years that I'm aware of. And interestingly enough, his father was a congressman and thought gold was great. But Warren Buffett has said, it's insane. You dig a hole in the ground, you pull some gold out, and then you take it and you shove it in another hole and you don't do anything with it. That's crazy. Well, Warren Buffett looked around and said, I've got all these pieces of paper sitting in a vault, and the government is destroying the value of those pieces of paper. I wonder what I could put it in that will retain its value. So everybody's aware that last week Warren Buffett made a major investment, not for him, but a major investment for Barrick, in Barrick. But what he's done just lately is he's been accumulating shares in Japanese trading companies for the last year or so. So Warren Buffett is interesting because he's pretty much thrown in the towel. Now, when the general population wakes up to the importance of investing in real resources as opposed to paper assets, we're going to have a run in gold and silver and the mining shares like nobody's ever dreamed of.
So I'd like to start there if we can. Last year we talked about not being able to call the top, and as you point out, when you have an issue with the dollar, the sky's the limit when it comes to gold. But my goodness, what is your sentiment when it comes to the miners and these producers of gold and those exploring for gold? What are your thoughts on where we are in this bull market cycle, looking at a $2,000 gold price?
We're at the sweet spot. The real key, and I'm glad you asked the question that way, the real key is not specifically the metal, and it's not even specifically the company. The real key is where we are in the cycle. And every company with any sense has gone out and they raised a lot of money, and they had to issue shares to do that. And they've got big drill programs going on. And I'm talking about, I know companies that raised $45 million and plan on 100,000 meter program this year and a 200,000 meter next year. But the key is if a company had decent management, they raised money when they could, and there's going to be a lot of extraordinary news over the next 3 to 6 months to a year. There are hundreds of companies that are up 100, 200, 300, 400%. I've got companies that are up 800% this year, and I'm not a genius. I'm just an ordinary guy who deals with a lot of people. I've never had an 800% return on an investment in my life, and now I've had several of them, and I'll tell you, it's just starting. It's going to go places that nobody has ever dreamed of before, because it's not the price of gold and silver going up. It is the value of the dollar going down. If you go into hyperinflation, the only place you can be safe is in resources.
Bob, you and I are mutual shareholders in Blue Lagoon Resources. Ticker on the U.S. side is BLAGF, and on the CSE, Canadian Exchange, BLLG. I'd like to ask you, what attracted you to this play in the resource sector?
Well, strange enough, what I just talked about, I'm in 30 or 40 stocks, and Blue Lagoon is just one. These guys have been really smart. Now, they have a tiny resource. They got about 230, 240,000 ounces of gold. They got about 1 million ounces of silver. But they went out because the market was good, and they raised 7.5 million. So they're right in the middle of a drill program right now. They are really well cashed up. They're in a project that has 10 to 15 grams of gold to the ton. So I think they're going to be successful, but I do want to make the point that I'm not talking about one or two or 10 or 50 companies being successful. There are going to be 1,000 companies that are successful. In this environment, if you got $7.5 million in the till and a decent project and you can't come up with some good results, you should be horsewhipped.
So I want to pick on your expertise and pick your brain on some of your expertise. You know, gold is one of the rarest elements in the world, making up roughly 0.003 parts per million of the Earth's crust. So through the years, because of a suppressed lower gold price, it was not economical for a lot of these companies to go after the more expensive gold. But now that we have $2,000 gold price, what's going to be the cycle for a lot of these mining companies in this higher gold price environment? Are they going to start going after the more expensive gold? I mean, what have we seen historically companies do?
Of course. They would be insane not to. If a guy's got a project and he can't make money at $2,000 gold, he needs to go back to driving taxi cabs. Okay, $2,000 gold, you could drill in your backyard and make money with $2,000 gold, and that's only the start. But what it means is the majors and the mid tiers are going to be just pumping out profits like crazy. They have not been replacing their reserves. They've literally been consuming their young. So there is going to be a cornucopia of majors and mid-tiers wanting to do deals with companies. The reason I like Blue Lagoon is because 230,000 ounces of gold doesn't sound like much, but in an environment of $2,000 gold, that's $460 million. If you can't mine something that's got cash flow of 460 million, you're in the wrong business. We're going to see some extraordinary things. It's just, and it's not because gold's so valuable, and it's not because silver's so valuable. It's because we have destroyed the functional currency that the economy relies on. Now, we're going to have to go to a jubilee. We're going to have to write off that money, and people are going to look at resources and say, you know, resources are valuable. Maybe we should put some money into them.
Bob, in conclusion here, we really didn't touch on silver. We alluded to it a couple times here, and maybe, you know, there's an extension of what we were talking about with gold that we can apply to silver. But specifically when it comes to silver, looking at where it's at now, the move we've seen in it, what are your thoughts on it going forward here? And maybe touch on the industrial component. Is that a problem for silver as we go deeper into 2020 and 2021 if we see some serious economic troubles for going forward?
Did you say if we see some serious economic troubles? We are guaranteed to see serious economic troubles. Here's what's interesting. Do you have any idea of how much of the gold ever produced is still above ground?
Is it still above ground? I assume it all is.
About 90%.
Okay.
10% has disappeared. It's at the bottom of the ocean or it's sitting in trash heaps. But 90% of the gold ever produced is still above ground. If you look at the yearly consumption, okay, you could go for 50 years and not produce any gold, and there's still plenty of gold around. We have a 70-year supply of gold at current consumption. Now, the interesting thing about silver is that by and large, it gets consumed. And that's really interesting because what it means is there's never going to be a shortage of gold. I mean, these guys running around saying there's going to be a COMEX default are full of crap. Okay, it's never happened. It's not going to happen. But the interesting thing is there going to be a shortage of silver? And the answer is probably yes. And what that means is that to drag silver out of Granny's closet, you're going to have to increase the price. Now, there's been a giant increase in the price of silver since March. And the silver has gone from a ratio of 131 ounces to buy 1 ounce of gold, which it was in mid-March, to about 69 ounces to buy an ounce of gold now. I am not a silver bug. I'm not even a gold bug, to tell you the truth. Silver bugs are crazy. They're as crazy as a three-legged gopher. And every one of them is convinced silver's going to $100 an ounce, or $500 an ounce, or $5,000 an ounce, all by itself. And I don't believe that's true. It's never been true in the past, and I don't believe it's going to be true in the future. However, the ratio of silver to gold, I think, is going to continue to favor silver. And there's hundreds of silver projects in Mexico that weren't economic at $15 silver, but at $30 silver, they're wildly economic. Silver, I think it's going to do better than gold.
Bob Moriarty, everyone. Bob's one of those guys I need to be on my toes because he asks me questions and I got to try to answer them during the interview. So I'll look forward to that next time as well. And what a treat it was to pick your brain, Bob. If you want to share some closing thoughts with the audience today, please do so. And then please let everyone know about your website, 321gold.com, and what they can find if they visit you there.
That's very kind of you to say. Somebody pointed something out to me recently. I've had the website for 19 years. To the very best of my knowledge, I'm the only guy in the industry who's got the gall or the balls. Every piece I have ever written is still on the website. So if anybody wants to throw rocks at me, they can. All of the evidence is there. What we try to do is focus on what's reasonable and what's possible. I'm not interested in manipulation. I'm not interested in conspiracies. I'm not interested in some planet that's going to crash into the United States, but I am interested in the economy, and I'm interested in COVID, and I'm interested in coming up with solutions to the very real problems that we face. We're going to go through some bad times, and people are going to have to think about what's important to them. And strange enough, the Depression was a great time for families to get together because they couldn't afford to do all the things they had done before. We're going to go through much the same thing again. If we would declare a jubilee and if we would go back to honest money, the problems would go away in about 18 months. And it's going to take a long time before governments actually are willing to admit that and do something about it.
Yeah, that's powerful. And it's interesting. I mean, the macro problems would go away, but obviously on an individual level, people would suffer a lot, which is going to have to happen. There's going to be a lot of pain to go through a real cleansing of the system. But the reset would be good for a good baseline to go off of.
Yes.
Bob, thank you so much for coming on the show with me today. Appreciate your time.
Ken, thank you. You asked very good questions. And thanks for putting up with me.
Always.